Hi, I'm Drew Halfmann from UC Davis, and today I'm going to be talking about how does the American welfare state shape gender inequality. Now, the ways in which the welfare state shapes gender inequality are similar for many disadvantaged groups, and this is stuff that is probably becoming familiar to you in this course by now. So first of all, when you have a pension system that's based on earnings, then people who have lower earnings during their working lives are going to have lower pensions when they retire. And so that's going to disproportionately affect African Americans, Latinos, women, people who earn less in the economy. Moreover, all three of those groups are more likely to have jobs that pay lower, okay, and jobs that have weaker benefits. So less possibility of getting health care from an employer, less possibility of getting pensions from an employer. Moreover, we already know that for those pensions, for those health care benefits, there are tax breaks provided by the government. So if your employer is not providing those things to you, you're not eligible for the tax breaks that the government provides. Okay? Lastly, women, African Americans, and Latinos are more likely to receive their benefits from means-tested programs. A means-tested program is a program that is based on being below a certain income rather than a program that goes to everybody or most everybody. Okay? Means-tested programs tend to be stingier, less generous. They often are stigmatizing in some way. And so receipt of benefits from those programs is not as desirable. So let me, as an example, it's less desirable to get benefits from the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families program. Benefits are quite low and quite stigmatized versus receiving benefits from Social Security, where benefits are quite high, universally provided, broadly popular, broadly legitimate. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. Gender roles have changed a lot in the post-war era, and the welfare state has had to react. In some countries, it reacted better than in others. Okay? So a few things have been going on. So one, in the United States, we have the end of the family wage. We have the rise of unstable and part-time employment. We have increased employment among women. We have women, well, people marrying later and having children later. There's more divorce, more out-of-wedlock births, thus more single-parent families. There's also the, with women's labor force participation has come this notion of the mommy tax, and this is in the Gornick reading. The notion that when women take breaks from their career for child rearing or childbirth, this hurts them in their career. Sometimes they participate in part-time employment in order to do child rearing. They may make occupational choices that make it easier to raise children, such as being a teacher or something like that, where you have summers off and you get home from school early. There's also a fair amount of employer discrimination against women because of employers' belief or fear that women will be leaving the labor force frequently to have children or care for children. So employers may discriminate against women as a result of that. And this is quite interesting because in the Swedish case, we'll notice that Sweden has these very generous family leave policies and childbirth policies, etc. And that actually has this sort of negative effect of increasing employer skepticism about hiring women. Okay? Because women can leave the labor force for a year with pay, many employers are reluctant to hire women for that reason. Okay, and that's sort of an unintended consequence of the policy. All right, so let's talk about gender and the welfare state in the U.S. So first thing to realize is that women are the main beneficiaries of the welfare state in the United States, and that's mainly because they live longer. Okay, so women are the big beneficiaries of the Social Security system. Okay, the men just die and don't collect their benefits. The women continue collecting their benefits for quite a long time. Okay. In addition, many women receive their benefits as dependents. Okay, in Social Security, there's a spousal benefit where, and it goes both ways. So a woman could receive a spousal benefit from a man could receive a spousal benefit from a woman. Someday we'll have same-sex marriages receiving those same benefits. But it's often man as the higher earner, women as the lower earner, and women claiming a Social Security benefit that's based on the man's salary. And I'll say more about this in a minute. So that's one thing. A second point I made already about earnings-based pensions replicating gender disparities. I made the point about employee benefits replicating gender disparities. The United States is unique in comparison to other rich countries, and especially to Sweden, in that it has family leave requirements for large companies, but it's unpaid family leave, okay? And that's unusual. Most European countries have a paid family leave for men and women who leave the workforce. The United States also does not have a family allowance, which is a payment to families with children. You could argue that our child tax credit is a form of family allowance, but it's not as generous as the family allowances in Sweden and in other countries. The United States also has very little public child care, and much of its child care is weakly regulated and not of particularly high quality. Lastly, the United States has very high poverty rates for women, and especially for single mothers with children. And I'll show you a few pictures about that. One is looking at, this one is looking at poverty rates by gender. The dark blue is men, the light blue is women. You can see that there's a higher percentage of women in poverty pretty much at every level, okay? But especially at the working age level, among working age people. And this shows the poverty rate in different types of families, okay? Families with a married couple have a poverty rate of 6%. Families with a single father have a poverty rate of 16%. Families with a single mother have a huge poverty rate of 31%. I mean, that's extremely high. All right, so I want to talk about this Social Security example that I talked about earlier. And so there's a way in which the spousal benefit in the Social Security system advantages sort of traditional breadwinner model families over families that have two earners, okay? And the example I'll give you here, so let's imagine we have two families that both earn $50,000 a year, okay? In the first family, it's a single earner family. And it could go either way, but we're gonna do it the traditional way here. We're gonna say the husband is the main breadwinner. We're gonna say that the wife is at home taking care of children, okay? Unpaid home labor. So that's the single earner family. In our readings, this was called the breadwinner model. Okay, this is a traditional model of the working husband, the stay-at-home wife. Okay, then we have the dual earner family, where the husband's making $25,000 a year, the wife is making $25,000 per year. Okay, so both families have a household income of $50,000. Okay, what I'm going to show you now is that the Social Security system gives more money to the single earner family, the breadwinner model family, than it does to the other family. Okay, and I'll explain why. So first, let's look at the single earner family. So this is once they retire. Okay, so now they retire. The husband has a pension of about $22,000. I just estimated what his pension would be based on his salary of $50,000. Okay. In addition, the wife, as his spouse, okay, she didn't work, so she didn't qualify for Social Security. Okay, but she qualifies for Social Security as his spouse. Okay, and she receives half of his benefit. Okay, so he gets $22,000. His wife gets $11,000. Okay, their total earnings under Social Security is $33,000 per year. Okay, now we go to the dual earner family. The husband, based on his income of $25,000 a year, receives a pension of $12,000. The wife, based on her income of $12,000 a year, her income of $25,000 a year, gets a $12,000 pension, and their combined pension is $24,000. Okay, so you can see that the single earner family is making out quite a bit better at retirement. Okay. Now, in this dual earner family, the wife could claim a spousal benefit if she wanted, or the husband could claim a spousal benefit, but it wouldn't do them any good because it's no better than the one that they're getting based on their work, right? So there would be no reason to do that. Now, let's look at after the husband dies, okay? In the single earner family, the wife would get her husband's pension. So he had an income of $50,000. He receives a pension of $22,000. So she receives his full pension as a spousal benefit. Okay? In the dual earner family, the wife can either get her own pension based on her work of $12,000, or she could take her husband's pension, which is also $12,000. Okay? But not both. Okay? So in that family, after the husband dies, in the single earner family, the wife will be making $22,000 a year. The wife in the dual earner family will be making $12,000 per year. Okay? So it's unequal. Okay? And it advantages, traditional breadwinner families. All right, so now I want to talk about gender-related welfare state policies in Sweden. Many of these we've encountered in the course before, but not all, and it's worth going over them again. So one is this notion that because pensions, or at least a big part of pensions, are given universally, meaning that everyone gets the same pension, then the pensions are not based on earnings during the lifetime. Okay? In addition, people get those universal pensions just because they're a resident of Sweden, not because they worked a certain amount or because their spouse worked a certain amount. So you do not have women in Sweden. Women in Sweden are getting their pensions as the result of their own residence, their own citizenship, not as the result of their relationship to a spouse. Okay? It's sort of a different way of making a claim. Okay? And this is true for men as well, obviously. So men are receiving their benefit because they are citizens or residents, not because their wife worked and they did not. Okay? There's pretty strong tax relief for working parents, and especially for single ones. As I've mentioned, there's a national child allowance. There's very high child support. And moreover, in the American case, if one of the parents does not pay their child support, the other parent, often the woman, goes without child support, okay, until she can track the person down or sue them or whatever. In the Swedish case, if there's a deadbeat dad, the government pays for the child support, or a deadbeat mom. Okay, I don't want to be. So I'm being totally sexist in the way I describe all this, but of course you understand that it could go either way. Okay. So in Sweden, the state is paying for those benefits until such time as they can find the person who owes them. Okay. As we read in the article, there's paid pregnancy leave and parental leave. And in recent years, Sweden has mandated that the man take some portion of that leave. Okay? And it's an attempt to try to get men to take a stronger role in child rearing in Sweden. Initially, when they did it, a lot of the men just went elk hunting, okay, during that leave. Okay? But things are changing, and roles are changing in Sweden, and people are arguing that it's had an effect. Okay, you can also have a 6-hour workday if you're a worker, if you're a parent. I'm sorry, but it's mainly mothers who take this. A parent that stays home with a child can have their job protected until the child is school age. Okay, so you could leave the labor force and then come back 6 years later and say, okay, I'm ready to take my job back. Okay? I mean, that's astonishing. Okay? There are paid days if your child is sick. There are also paid days if you need to go to a school conference for your child. There's inexpensive and high-quality child care in preschool. Very strong poverty reduction. And I'll show you a picture that compares poverty reduction in different countries. You can see that Sweden starts out, if Sweden didn't have a welfare state, it would have a poverty rate of 26.7%. But because of all of its various programs, family allowances, child care provision, et cetera, it reduces the special aid to single mothers with children. They reduce the poverty rate to 5.3% of the population. So it's just a very strong poverty reduction by their welfare state. If we compare it to the United States, down here near the bottom, the United States has a very similar poverty rate without the welfare state. So in Sweden it would be 26.7%. In the United States, it would be 26.3%. So the market is producing similar levels of poverty in both of these capitalist economies. Okay? The difference is that the United States does not spend the money to end this poverty in the way that Sweden does. Okay? So the American welfare state reduces poverty to 17% of the population versus Sweden's 5%. So it's a big difference. And this is a difference, as we've mentioned, the poor are disproportionately women with children. This has a tremendous impact in terms of gender. Now, there's a few weak spots in terms of gender on the welfare state, and I've alluded to some of these already. So one of these is that I talked in an earlier class about how Sweden is renowned for having active labor market policy in which they help workers to get new skills for new types of jobs. They help workers to move to a new place for a job. They help workers to find a new job, et cetera, et cetera. But the bulk of these sort of active labor market policies are really oriented towards men and men in the manufacturing sector. And so there's a gender disparity there in terms of who's receiving active labor market policy. There's also huge occupational segregation in the Swedish labor force. Okay? So Sweden has this huge welfare state of child care workers, teachers, healthcare workers, home care workers. And who are all those people? Women. Okay? Largely women. Okay? And then in the private sector, in business, in manufacturing, and other things, largely men. Okay? And, I exaggerate. Obviously, there's people from both genders in both places, but disproportionate. Okay? And in some ways, this sort of answers the question of, you might ask, well, how can Sweden let people leave how can Swedish employers let somebody leave for 6 years and then come back and take their job back? Okay? Well, it's likely that that job is in the public sector. It's within the welfare state, okay, rather than being with a private employer, okay? And that doesn't make it easier necessarily, but it does make it more likely that the employer would be willing to do that, okay, since it is the government itself that's doing the employment, okay? I've also mentioned that there's a stereotype in Sweden of women being less attached to the labor force, more likely to leave the labor force because of all these generative leave policies. There's also been a spread of part-time work to accommodate women who stay home with children, but this has often meant that women who would like more work have difficulty finding it. So there's sort of a spread or an increase in involuntary part-time employment. Thank you for watching. Oh, thank you. All right, Canyon. Next time I'm going to give you this. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, that's all on film. I'm going to edit it, though. Yeah, next time I'll give you, like, the signs, like the applause signs. Okay. All right, so I'm going to cut the film. No, I think I'm going to leave it on, but I'm going to be, less formal. So I want to talk a little bit about residential segregation. So, you saw this film where I talked with a couple grad students about what we might do to alleviate racial inequality. And in that movie, I made the point that I think residential segregation is key. Okay, and so I want to sort of reiterate that point. Okay, I really think that the ghettos are really a key nexus of contemporary racial inequality, because there's all these ways in which they increase other types of inequalities, okay? So first of all, we'll talk about politics, okay? So if you have a neighborhood that is largely poor, okay, you're also going to have a neighborhood that is, and I guess I should also say, when I'm talking about residential segregation, so it is the case that both poor blacks and middle-class blacks are sort of equally likely to be segregated, okay? But what I'm really talking about is poor black ghettos, okay? Concentrated poverty, okay? And when you have a neighborhood like that, that neighborhood is less likely to vote, first of all, okay? Because poor people don't vote as much as middle-class and rich people. Second of all, they're less likely to have money to contribute to candidates. Okay, they're also busier and less likely to be volunteering for candidates, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all, and then lastly, they have less power in general, societal power. So if a mayor wants to close a fire station someplace, okay, because of budget cuts, okay, where will they do it? Beverly Hills or South Central? Okay? Let's say they want to put a toxic waste dump somewhere. Where should we put it? Beverly Hills or South Central? Okay? You get concentrated poverty in a neighborhood, and that neighborhood is exposed to all sorts of political abuse, essentially, because that neighborhood doesn't have the power to defend itself. Okay? So there's, so that's the first issue. Okay? There's also an issue when you have a neighborhood full of concentrated poverty. You'll have fewer people employed, and those who are employed will be employed in not as good jobs. Oopsie. Oh, okay, now I'm not on tape anymore. Or I won't be soon. Hold on one second.
It's gonna be deleted.
No, I gotta stop this thing. Yeah. Okay. Where is it?
You didn't record it.
No, but you saw me hit the button and it said 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. Oh. All right. Well, that was a good. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Search it.
What's today? Yeah, I don't see it here. It should be that one, but I don't think that's it. All right. Well, so be it. Document entitled. All right. Gender.